Our topic this evening is nationalism versus God of all nations. I want to remind you that our class is shaping a Bible-based life. And the idea behind that is a simple one, and that is, I believe, and I'm trying to show through the scriptures that it is possible to live your life based upon what you find in the Bible, your value system, your beliefs, your simple way of life. It sounds easy, and yet at the same time, we often will find ourselves picking up something in the culture that's around us, and because we agree with it, it'll end up thinking, well, therefore that must be something that God approves of too. This evening I'd like to limit our discussion. It can go in so many different directions, but I'd like to limit it not so much as internal, but as I guess what I'm trying to say is, for us as Christians, do we look at this country as something that's special? Do we look at it as something that God is on our side, that He loves our country perhaps more than others? Do we enjoy a special favored status? Now, if you want to get into a little study of history, you'll find that in American history, you'll find that that is basic belief and a basic teaching in schools up to about the 1950s. By the 60s rolling around, with everything that happens in the 60s, you're going to find a change in that. By the time I went through my extra stuff in history, it was very unusual to take any grad class where you had in American history, where you had anything really positive to say about the United States. It was for the first time, the way they would put it, it would be, what we're going to do is center our attention on the people who have been overlooked. And there's some validity to that. And so it was mostly Native Americans. It was mostly, well, I remember Gerald Stanley out at Cal State Bakersfield did Western Frontier. And he wrote a book on the children of the Dust Bowl. Some of you actually may have read that a few years ago. It was an interesting book. And when I was meeting with him on my master's, basically I would meet with him in his office, and he would talk about the book and how much money he was making from it. So it was he was a delightful guy, but you would listen to him and it was very interesting, but he would basically, okay, now this is the Western Frontier, this is what Native Americans, he was always upset, I hope I'm not out of line here, he was always upset that he did not write a book on prostitutes in the American West. And you're saying, what in the world, why would people write that? Because they were the unknown, so it was the thing to write. He even had the title. And it's tacky, but it's not dirty. He wanted to call it Hookers on the Horizon. And you know, if someone had written that, if he had written that and published it, he would have made a lot of money. And someone beat him to it on the East Coast, and he was very upset about that. But I tell you that story I tell you because I find it humorous, but I also tell you to show you that that's the way we're looking, and that continues on. If you're under 30, you're going to be looking at nationalism in a much different way than those that are over 30. And so we're going to be having a discussion here. If you've just kind of set it up where, you know, your mind that it works only in a certain way, you're going to find that people look at that term in several different ways. More than 4 in 10 Americans think the U.S. should be a Christian nation, is in a fairly recent thing. Patriotic education, pride or problem. 1.3 million, whatever that is, I don't teach math, said, is teaching patriotism, nationalism to minors okay? They said no. No. Is it K 1,000? Okay, thanks. If you can see the 4 in 10 Americans think the U.S. should be a Christian nation, it says all U.S. adults believe that the founders of the United States, 60% of them believe that the founders of the United States were Christians and made this a Christian nation. Okay? Today, Protestants, 73% said the founders were Christian. Catholic, 62%. Atheist, 25% said. That's a fairly high number for 25. Then you come to, is the U.S. a Christian nation now? What I find most interesting is the highest number on that are the Jews. The Jewish Americans feel that this is a Christian nation. They didn't say it was in a positive way, but they said it was a Christian nation. Who are today? What is the lowest number? Let's see if it's up here. White, where am I at? White evangelical. White evangelical are the ones who are most critical of the United States being a Christian nation today. And that's not surprising, really, when you think about it. All right? But look at the bottom ages, 18 through 29. The U.S. should be a Christian nation. That's in our last thing. 18 to 39, 23 said yes, if you're between ages 18 to 23. 30 to 49, 39 believe yes. 50 to 64, 56 say yes. 65 and above, that is what, they call it the greatest for some reason, don't they? But anyway, we won't go there. 63%. It's a huge change, 63%, 23%. So again, if you're sitting here thinking, well, I don't think it's a Christian nation, but everybody else thinks it's a Christian nation. Not only do the young people in general not think it's a Christian nation, they think that's a negative to even consider that. It should not even be considered as a Christian nation, just something that we can look at. Let's go at a couple of different terms. We need some terms here. Nationalism is a blind loyalty to one's country, often with the belief in its superiority. It can be linked to the religious conviction that one's country is God's chosen people. Now, this is not the only definitions we can use, so I'm going to ask us to use this definition for this class so that we can kind of be talking about the same things. To be patriotic, you'll find, is much more lenient. It means to appreciate one's country, be proud of its good qualities, while also being able to criticize it when necessary and show loyalty when possible. So those are terms that we'll be using, nationalism and patriotism. Does this sound familiar? It's from a politician's speech. I won't tell you whether it's a Democrat or Republican because it really doesn't matter. Where do you recognize some of these words? Yeah, it came from the song. How do you like comparing the blood of Christ with American citizens and their goodness? It's really I know it kind of hit you. You thought, well, oh, is this the way we're going? Yeah, I want us to see that. Think about that for a second. The ideal of America is the hope of all mankind. That hope still lights our way, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness will not overcome it. What do you recognize on some of these words? John 1, 4 and 5, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. What do you make with comparing Jesus with the ideal of America?
Is that from the same speech there?
No. All these are different speeches, different over a period of time of about 10 or 15 years, standard political speeches. In other words, not standing in front of an evangelical crowd necessarily, but just standing in front of people and giving. Obviously, the audience is directed toward this, but.
Larry, the only people in the audience that are going to catch that are Christians who are Bible study Christians. The rest of the world isn't going to get it. I mean, even religious people, they're not going to know that that's scripture.
Well, but it may not recognize, she says that only Bible believing Christian, Bible studying Christians are going to be able to catch that, and that's probably true to a degree, but it's obviously in there and they feel that it's doing something, because speechwriters don't put a line like that in just as a filler. And so it's there to kind of sway them in certain ways. What are they trying to sway the audience toward? That we're a special country. That we're a special country. I still believe that America is the last best hope of the earth. Where do you recognize some of these words? Well, you know, John Winthrop on his famous sermon on, no, I won't do that to you, okay, on the Puritans and a light shining on a hill, which is also misunderstood, but we won't go into that. It doesn't like that slide, Rachel. I tried this on Saturday, and was it Saturday? Friday, Saturday. I know some of you guys were back there working on stuff. And I noticed part of my slide was missing. And so I went home and changed it, and apparently it still doesn't like it. How about Matthew, the 12th chapter, in verse 21? In his names the nations shall put their hope. Or as Winthrop said, it's a light shining on a hill. And what he was doing was pointing out that the Puritan church in America was going to become so pure that those in England would see it and then invite them, come on over and fix our stuff for us. They weren't invited over. And so let's go to Jonah. Let's look at a few more false stories, the worldly filter. And we know where we're going. Most of you have read Jonah enough, and it's such a short book. We're not going to talk about the big fish. But in Jonah, the first chapter, in verses 1 through 3 that I have up here, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. And then it goes on from there. Let's ask this. Why is Jonah running away?
Because in Jonah's mind, Nineveh was evil and could not be saved.
Why was Nineveh evil? They were the bad guys. Okay, I'm going to do this to him. He started this. Why are they the bad guys? Don't say they're evil.
Because they're currently at war with it. And this is very close to the time that Assyria is conquering the northern kingdom.
And so obviously then Jonah really doesn't want to go there. Chapter 3, verses 2 through 4. This is after all the incident that you guys know. Arise, he's told again, go to Nineveh, that great city, call out against the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey in breadth. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They called for a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest of them to the least of them. Do you think Jonah was expecting that? Would you be expecting that? Why is Jonah then displeased? Well, let me ask that again, probably in the proper time. Why is he displeased with this?
He's displeased because his filter of these people was wrong. So we don't like to be wrong. You know, these people are evil. We're at war with them. This is, you know, God should not love them. We do that with normal people, just people day to
What was he feeling about God? What was he feeling about God? We know he didn't like the Ninevites.
Was he trying to control who, or thinking that he could try to control who should be shown mercy?
Well, it could very well be. That's a very good point. You know, in the very beginning, I mean, as he goes along, we go back to those missing chapters that we didn't cover. And of course, he starts taking off for Tarshish, and what a coincidence. There just happens to be a boat right there. And he just happens to get on it, and he just happens to sail away. All those things seem to be, just, the cards are being laid one right after the other. They're all going for him. And so now he finally gets there. No, don't answer this one out loud. Who do you not like? Whether it's a group, whether it's a country. And when I say that, please don't stop and go, we're Christians, we're supposed to like everyone. I think you kind of know what I'm getting at here. There's different intensity to this, and we see. And then what happens if they don't meet your expectations? What if they actually do something out of the ordinary that actually is good, and you can't find any reason to kind of give some, underhanded reason for them trying to be good? How dare they try to be good? Just mess me up. How common is that?
Well, we do it with individuals too.
Yep.
We have the value system that says he or she's a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
If they do something good, it can't be sincere, or I just want to overlook it.
And that's general, and if you could hear there, we do it with individuals, and we sometimes just kind of overlook it. It just doesn't meet it doesn't connect. These people called for a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest of them to the least. How big is this city? Well, give me an idea of how long does it take to walk across from one side of the city to the other? 3 days. So, I mean, this thing is big. A little later, it's going to tell us it's 120,000 souls. In the olden days, I could remember what I was doing. The olden days being in my imagination, probably. How does Jonah view Israel at this time? How does Jonah view Israel at this time? Let me come to chapter 4. It displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. Keep that in mind as we look at this. And he prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, is this not what I said when I was yet in my country? This is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish. For I know that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and relenting from disaster. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me. And it goes on from there. Does that sound, the section that I have in green up here, does it sound kind of familiar? It sounds Old Testament-y, doesn't it? We know that. Actually, if you go back to Exodus, the 34th chapter, you're going to find that that's what God tells Israel. When he's explaining to Israel why Israel will be the chosen ones. And now here's Jonah repeating it to God. Why? Now I'm going to assume something, and I might be wrong, but if I am wrong, then I misunderstand the whole book. Jonah is upset because we are the chosen people, and you are selecting someone else. We are the chosen people. We know what's right, and you actually have the gall to choose someone else. And who's he saying that to? God, which is why he probably says the next section, take my life. Isn't he in fact challenging him at this time? Take my life. If we're going to live in that kind of world, I don't want to live here. And then look at verse 11. When he looks at the very bottom of this, as we see what God says. And it's this section that I find the most interesting of everything that we're looking at tonight. And should not I pity Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle. This is an evil people doing evil things in God's sight. He gave them an opportunity. Jonah's mad because he gave them the opportunity. Do we get mad because others get the opportunity and they don't deserve it? And God says, shouldn't I pity these people also? Go ahead.
What does that mean, they do not know their right hand from their left? Does it just mean that
They're not aware of God in that way. They haven't been taught. That's how I'm taking it. At the same time, even those principles of which they should know about God that one can see from the world around, they don't even follow that. But in this case, God is talking not about their evil attitude. He's talking about their ignorance in these things. They're ignorant of God. They're ignorant of God, but if I tell them about God, then they're going to be like us, so I can't tell them about God. Isn't this a great lesson about evangelism when you think about it that way? This is why we go out and teach. And we don't decide who that would be, who we should teach. But that's not all. If we go to Jeremiah, in Jeremiah, the 7th chapter, we find a prophet who's warning God's people in Judah about their wickedness and impending judgment. The people are outwardly wicked and unjust, yet they have a belief that God will not abandon his presence at the temple in Jerusalem. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, stand in the gate of the Lord's house and proclaim there this word and say, hear the word of the Lord, all you men of Judah who enter these gates to worship the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your deeds, and I will let you dwell in this place. Do not trust in these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. For if you truly amend your ways and your deeds, if you truly execute justice one with another, if you do not oppress the sojourner, the fatherless, or the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not go after other gods to your own harm, then I will let you dwell in this place, in the land that I gave of old to your fathers forever. Behold, you trust in deceptive words to no avail. What is Jeremiah upset about? What are the chosen ones doing? Whatever they feel like. Whatever they feel like at the time. And how are they justifying when they go ahead and do something? Where's God? God is in his temple. Who has the temple? This is the temple of the Lord. This is the temple of the Lord. We house God. God is home with us. Now I want to come back to that one of the first slides where it had the Americans that believe this should be a Christian nation, et cetera, et cetera. Let me ask you this. If nations generally follow God's commands in a general way, are they going to be generally, what word am I looking for? You can tell I'm really having a hard time tonight, sorry. Better off, there, that's the fancy word I was looking for, perfect. Do you believe that? Janine?
we know because we can teach those who do believe in a God.
She said the communists and the socialist countries do not believe in God, and they're trying to take over the world. And so this country then should believe in God so that it could teach them about God.
Or the ones that are here, at least.
Does this country do that? See, here's the reason I wanted to bring that up that way. I want you to think about this, because I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and I can't come up with an answer entirely. It's kind of like when you meet someone, when we talk about the people that it was talked about this morning, talked about hating Christians. I don't have anybody like that in my connection. I've never really met anybody like that. They're out there, I know that. I'm not doubting that. But I'm saying, are we talking about stuff that's kind of beyond what we control when we talk about a country? Our country doing so? And yet on the other hand, if the country as a whole this is why it gets confusing to me. If the country as a whole totally disavows anything about Christianity, is the Bible teaching that we believe in an active God, is God going to not allow that to continue? You see where I kind of go, Robert.
Well, I think back to one of the questions you just asked a few moments ago, is in a general way, are countries more successful when they follow certain godly or biblical principles? And I think there is some evidence to that, especially with our country, as there is, our democracy was able, or our republic, was able to function because of some of the commonly held Judeo-Christian morality that we have. And I think there is some evidence that countries can function better when there is a certain sense of morality among them. Is that a hard and fast rule? No. But as a general rule of practice, yes. To your question earlier, I think
I was kind of taking that along with, general thing like with the Proverbs. Mark taught that a while back. With the Proverbs, if someone picks up the Proverbs and is not a Christian and follows it along and does basically most of the things that it talks about doing in terms of attitude and all that, they're probably going to be better off in this society than someone who doesn't. Unless we want to make the argument that if you steal, you actually are going to come out ahead. And I don't want to go there. And so in that case, it does. I think it works that way for countries also. But I'm not trying to solve anything for you here. I'm really trying to muck it up, because I figure if I can't understand it, hey, you're going to be in that same boat with me. How about this? In the Old Testament, Moses is a great leader and the people don't follow. In other places, the people follow and the leader is horrible. There doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason for us to say, well, if we elect, this kind of is some of the stuff that's happening today. If we elect a certain person, well, then that's going to create a situation where we're going to have a certain kind of country. Well, that doesn't really work that way. I'll bring up abortion very quickly. 60% of Americans are in favor of some kind of abortion. All right, it's a simple fact. Every state that has had an allowance, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying here is a fact that you may have a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, I don't care, okay, as the leader, but generally speaking, the people speak with a majority in that case. Is God going to look at that and say, someday I'm going to get so tired of it, I'm going to overthrow this country? Perhaps, but now this is why I'm going to come back to this. Come back to what he says in Jeremiah. See, we kind of skip these things. If you truly amend your ways in what? In deeds. If you execute justice one with another. Are these the things that are the hot buttons that we hit when we start talking about religion and government? I would tell you that no, they're not. But they're the things God mentions. If you do not oppress the sojourner, the fatherless, or the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, that can mean several things and should. And if you do not go after other gods to your own harm, then I will let you dwell in this place. That's what he promised there. I know it's a specific promise for a specific group of people, but I believe it's also a general theme for any country. That when you do the general things that are there, so is our country better than others? No. No. Because country is made up of a whole bunch of people, and we seem to forget that. Wait, I rambled, sorry.
So, under the old covenant, the people were promised a land. That land has been in some kind of battle since then, like, and today. But with coming of Christ, that promise was already fulfilled. The land doesn't matter anymore. Our land doesn't matter. It's not like Christ just said, oh, look at America, they're so big, let me just, cover them with my grace.
From sea to,
But, I mean, so you can't look at it as each country and each country being protected by God. Like, it's the people. It's if you're actually following the truth and doing as they were supposed to do in Jeremiah.
so let me ask this, do we look at socialist and communist countries as enemies, or do we look at them as God did, perhaps, and that is to be pitied, because they don't have God? Go ahead, I'm sorry. I'll come over here in a sec.
That worked out good because I was going to comment on what Janine said. We need to understand that socialist and communist governments are against God. People who live in that country are not necessarily, we don't know them, so we don't know all of
Yeah.
them. But there are many people who live in communist countries who in fact do believe in God, even people of that nation.
Mhm.
And so, so the socialist and the communist governments try to squash God, but not necessarily the people.
So whatever country, are you one of those that can name the countries? Would spin the globe and just point at something and go, this is this country, this is this country, this is this country. Okay? If you're pretty good at that, then next time you do it, think about this. Think about, those are all God's countries. Because he's still in control. And when we have an opportunity to teach there, we teach. Go ahead, Robert.
I apologize if I'm jumping ahead, but I think one thing we learned from Jeremiah, Isaiah, and many of the minor prophets, is that no country is going to last forever. Even God's chosen people fell, went into captivity. Every nation receives judgment in the prophets. They all rise, they all fall to some circumstance. I always think of Tyre, this nation that set on the hill that literally set in the middle of the ocean that, never thought they could be defeated, and yet they fell. And God said they were going to fall. And the only thing that I always look at is that there's a promise, and you see this multiple times in Isaiah, is I will leave a remnant. No matter what happens to the nations, the people, there will always be a remnant that God will leave of the people that follow after him.
Final thing about Jonah. Jonah wants to die. Remember the story? He sets up on the hill waiting for Nineveh. What happens with the plant? Grows over him, shields him from the hot sun. What happens to the plant? It dies. What does he complain about? What does he complain about? The heat. Just horrible. Horrible. Are we capable of understanding what God has planned? That's my point, and that's what I think he's saying. You have more pity for yourself than for these people. Do we really understand? Can we draw a spreadsheet or whatever you want to call it and plot out what God is going to do? And if that's the case, do we take it just as we have opportunity? Maybe that's what he's talking about. Looking, we can look forward and plan. That's needed. But planning and thinking that we actually have a grasp of what's going to happen and we can control it is something different. And maybe that'll lead us to what we're going to talk about next week. Well, I better do this one. I forgot this. And I forgot the positive side, didn't I? For God so loved the world. Did he what? That he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Careful there. It's not the not believing in Christ. It's not the not believing in Christ that condemns him. It's his sins that condemn him. Jesus is the life raft. Just because you didn't get in the right life raft doesn't mean the life raft killed you. The sins kill you. And that's what it says here. Whoever believes in him, but in order that the world might be saved through him, whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he's not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And then I go here to Acts 10, and what does Peter say finally? He says, God shows no partiality, but to every nation. And every nation just simply meaning every person in that nation. Next week then, well, I want to get through, don't I? You can tell. Next week, what would it look like for Judah to be on God's side based on the Jeremiah passage? I wish I'd done this 10 minutes ago. What would Judah have to do to change? Well, they'd have to do those things we mentioned. What would the United States have to do? Well, you know, if we put all our people together, in the United States and created an organization, maybe we could, or how about this? We go to our neighbor and we talk to them. Go ahead, I didn't mean to cut off.
The same thing, as individuals, you do what you can do.
You do what you can do.
Just like the congregation here. This church is not going to be saved. The individuals within this church are going to be saved.
Mhm.
So that's how I think you just kind of incrementally work up in terms of size. I think it's always going to be that way. It's not nations or it's not cities.
It's people. Next week, pride versus humility. This side pride, this side humility. We'll go at it and see how it works out pretty well. And now wait, sheep, goats, is that the way it works? Thank you so much. I better quit.